artificial intelligence will completely transform our world. But what is AI? Why will it affect you? And how can you and your business survive and thrive through the AI revolution? Welcome to AI and You. Here is your host, author, speaker, and futurist, Peter Scott.
Hello, welcome to episode 310. I've been talking with Professor Michael Gerlich, Head of Center for Strategic Corporate Foresight and Sustainability at SBS Swiss Business School in Zurich, Switzerland. We're talking about his new book, The Convenience Trap: What Happens When AI Becomes the Mind Behind Our Lives, and it's about the threats to what I call our cognitive autonomy when we use AI the wrong way. Michael published a paper last year about a widely cited study showing that students' use of AI for cognitive offloading impaired their critical thinking. But his new research shows that following what he calls the structured prompting protocol of using your brain first and then AI results in improved learning, and we're talking about that too. Michael's research and publications focus on the societal impact of AI. He's also taught at the London School of Economics and Political Science, Cambridge, and other places. He's also been an advisor to the President and Prime Minister of Kyrgyzstan, the Uzbekistan Cabinet, and Ministers of Economic Affairs in Azerbaijan. Last week, we heard a story that shows how dependent students have become on AI, then talked about how to avoid cognitive offloading, how to use AI more effectively, the anchoring effect of AI use, using a GPS as an analogy, and the risks of unexamined AI use. This week, we're going to talk about conducting as a metaphor for directing our thinking, AI's effects on group collaboration, the effects on humans who are reduced to being monitors of AI, the mental models schools have of AI, possible controls on children using AI, and how AI companies might improve their products to help with these problems. So let's get back into the interview with Michael Gerlich. When you talk about people using AI for everything, I don't think that's necessarily the problem. Because I could say, well, I use electricity for everything, I use water for everything, I use computers or semiconductors for everything. I think that the issue you're pointing out is in how much of our control, our authority, our agency do we give over to AI. And the image that's coming to mind here is of a conductor, that our role in solving problems or learning is of the conductor of the orchestra. And it seems as though the problem arises when the conductor finds that the orchestra can just start playing and their role is reduced to, or they have reduced their role to listening and going, do I like that or not? And I think that could be applied in both the workplace and in learning situations, both for how well are we doing at using AI for some purpose, and how well are we doing at using it in our learning. Can you adapt that metaphor there for the process of learning and talk about what the pitfalls are that you're seeing of students using AI to impair or negate their learning? And if you could just talk about that, perhaps a structured prompting algorithm, the process there, the way in which it could go the other direction, where they remain the conductor.
Yeah. So first of all, I love that you're talking about conducting, right? And it makes sense in a way, right? When we look now, when we go into the schools and we look or at universities, we look at the students there, that's a little bit different. It's not just about conducting, because first of all, we have to learn. It doesn't matter that AI knows everything. We still have to understand it. You still have to learn. It's not enough to say, okay, because we have calculators, we still learn math. But we have a tool now that helps us to answer or to solve the mathematical problem maybe faster than what we had before. So it is important for the human still to learn. AI will not come to the point that sometimes you hear, why should I study at all? Why should I learn at all? I have everything in my AI. No, that's not, because then we actually hand it over control fully to the AI. And we know that in the learning process, biases are included, right? You can influence as well the AI in the training process? I mean, there are so many reasons, right? It's not a computer program that when you have always the same input, you get the same output. So there are many, many reasons why specifically for students, we have to consider that learning is a very important part. And let me go back again to the MIT study that clearly showed that the participants didn't remember anything. So where's the learning effect? We have to be careful. And I want to stress out again, it's not AI that is the problem. It's the wrong use of AI. We have, first of all, to understand how we should use AI and what we are being taught, whether it's on social media or by the AI companies, by the Microsofts, by the Googles. It's just the opposite of the prompting. It is you tell the AI everything, what you need it for. The more information you give, the better it can work for you. But this is 100% cognitive offloading, right? This is, except for the process, what information do I have to give? Because there you still have to think, right? This is still a thinking process. But this is not the critical thinking that we are looking for, that we want to develop, right? Where you add actually to the output, that you add to the result as a human. And you should be in control and not just conducting. It's even further. We should be in control of the thinking process. I said it before. For students, it is something that they have to learn. And this is not something that comes in the age of 6, 7, 10, or 12. Sometimes it comes at the age of 20 or older, that the critical thinking is really fully developed. We see that at university with bachelor students in the first semester. You can't see it, you can't feel it. And then slowly they get critical. Slowly you can see that they smell the blood and the interest, right? And they really want to. And this is where we see critical thinking developing, where they start understanding and not just remembering even, right? And if you use the AI in that process, you wouldn't even remember. We're not even talking about understanding and applying it in the different situation and being more creative. I don't know whether in the last podcast I gave you the example of the candle and the light bulb. So when we have a candle, romantic, right, Valentine's Day, you can go and ask your AI, can you please help me improve the candle? It probably can create something that shines brighter, longer, is cheaper, and maybe have the most outstanding design. But it will not go from the candle to the light bulb, because that's the kind of, and I know this is an extreme example because that is human innovation, human creativity, that is out of the box thinking, right? But to come to this point, you have to learn the critical thinking. You have to go through that process that you maybe one day can question science, like the brother Wrights when they created the first airplane. At that time, science said flying is not possible. And the AI in those days would not have been able to create the airplane because large language models look for patterns in information. And the pattern in the information in those days was, it is not possible. AI is not smart. AI is just going through all available information. And where she sees the biggest pattern, it assumes that must be the right answer. And that's why I'm always saying we have to be careful. It is not a software. It is a different kind of intelligence. It works differently. So to rely on that is not so easy. Now, for young people, it is important to go through that process and, sometimes the torture of thinking, and don't go the convenient way. Use AI in the right way. We encourage students to use AI, but not in a way that you directly ask it for a question and they answer. The last time I told you, I could see this clearly when AI came out, because every student, they have their laptop, right? They're sitting there, no one writes on paper anymore. And as soon as they had kind of a group work to do, it became so quiet. Everyone was typing in their computer and were directly the question, the task they had to do, they directly gave into AI without thinking even and getting an answer. And there was no more this discussion. There was no more this, like I said, that critical challenging discussion that you have otherwise at a university. But this has to be created.
Right. You describe this process in the book under the title of The Disappearing Circle, where you're observing students in a group tasked with solving a problem, and now when they have AI, they become dependent on the AI. Let's ask it what it thinks about this. They're ceding their control over to that. I wonder whether the framing is partly responsible for that, because they are given the task of solve this problem. They are not told, as far as I can tell, enhance your learning. See how much of a better thinker you can become as a result of this process, which is the goal. But if they're not told that, then how can you blame them for solving the problem as best they can? Whereas if the task was something like, do today's Wordle, well, clearly that's not about solving a problem. That's about learning in the process of doing that. So can a school frame that assignment better so that they're not tempted to just take it at face value?
Of course, and you're absolutely right. I'm always saying my students know it's not about the output. It's about understanding and that you critically can apply what you learned in different situations, right? So obviously, in the example that I have in the book as well, the students are fully aware. Why do we do even group work? Because it's about the discussion between the students with each other, that they challenge themselves. And there is so much more than the problem itself. To solve that, that's not the biggest issue, right? Group work has so many nuances, right? Why we ask for group work, right? And this disappeared pretty much because everyone is just asking, is only focusing on the result. But you're right. It has to be framed correctly. And there's a problem in our society. And you brilliantly said that before, right? If we are on the job, just results oriented, who can blame me if I'm trying to get most efficient in creating the result? For now, the AI does not create the best result that we have seen. The human with the AI together still create the better results than AI alone or the human alone. So that might change. And this can change within months even, right? When it gets better, and maybe, who knows, maybe then the output that generative AI creates is maybe on a higher level. But for now, it is the human part is needed. And when we, in schools, in university, frame the task the wrong way, and we support that we have just the efficient output, then I agree with you, then we should not complain if students just relate to AI and say, well, here you have your result.
So I think we're getting at something very important here, which is the distinction between what a workplace, to use perhaps a narrow term, but we'll use that for now, what a workplace needs out of its employees and what education is providing to students, because those seem to be diverging quite rapidly at the moment due to AI. We are seeing patterns in, of course, especially knowledge work, where people are being put in the role increasingly of being the observer / shepherd of AI. And they're reporting some burnout from this because they're essentially like being in the seat of an autonomous vehicle that's driving at breakneck speed down the freeway and may at some point decide to run into a lamppost, and their job is to stop it before it does that. Otherwise, just keep watching it. And that's the process that's being reported in many places now as businesses use AI to accelerate what they have been doing. It's hopefully a naive and preliminary way of doing it, that they are not transforming their processes, they're merely accelerating them with AI, but it's coming at a human cost. That process quite manifestly doesn't care about the employee learning anything. And it's not heading in a good direction, except at the moment, probably temporarily, for the businesses that are realizing these greater results. So how can education raise a generation of students that understand the role of humans in the interaction with AI better so that they can repair this dysfunctional relationship when they get to a workplace so that we have a proper and supportive, symbiotic relationship with AI instead of this mad AI spinning the hamster wheel with us inside it?
Okay, before I answer the question, let me just stay for a second on the corporate level, what you were saying, right? Because that leads pretty much to pushing the human out of the loop, because AI is always faster and we have to be very careful. I'm writing this in the book as well. We have to create friction in the process to calm down that the human can actually add to the process. And it was interesting. It was last year in summer in Stockholm at the Future Talent Council, where many head of HRs from global corporations were. And I addressed that point as well. And the head of HR from Lego said, "Oh, Michael, this is really very important. We already have a tool, what they call Campfire. This is when they're just calling, someone has an idea or something, just calling an unscheduled meeting. They come together, have brainstorming, do that, and they do this quite intensively in their company." And he said, and we could formalize this in processes where AI is being used, that we actually create the friction, that we stop the process, that we can actually have the discussion, have the control, and not to get overrun by a lot faster AI and being pushed. So that's just one part. The second part is that a company in the automotive industry, I had a talk with them, and they told me that they have a problem with their software engineers, their programmers, that the young people that come currently into the organization depend too much on AI and don't have the skill set anymore that is being needed, which is actually the skill set of rather a senior software engineer than a young one, right? And they see this critically. So that is currently the situation. Now, coming back to your question, how can we now prepare young people in education to challenge this early enough? And we come always back to, first of all, understanding AI, right? To understand how to use AI, that we don't just have, oh, AI is bad, let's not use it, because that's not the solution. It's out there. People have to use it on the job later. It is there. But we have to teach them what is, and this is important in the industry as well, what should AI do and what should humans do? What are the skills that we humans have that AI does not have, that we can actually contribute to the process? And those skills we should teach, we should foster, we should train our students, right? There will be definitely a change in how we teach students and what we teach students. And one very important part is this critical thinking, this thinking out of the box, not the typical systematic thinking, because that AI can do a lot better than I can do, right? Because it can see the best pattern that is out there, but I can challenge, I can, as a human, I can think out of the box, can think totally creatively, maybe chaotic. And we should foster that, right? So we should actually create young people that are challenging, that are creative in their thinking, and that they learn that AI is there, it's good, but use it in the right way. Use it in a way that you contribute. And the contribution, when I hear upskilling, I have to, actually, I always said, no, it's downskilling, but the colleague who is the lead author from the MIT study, she told me, and we had a conversation, and she said, well, Michael, it is de-skilling nowadays, right? What is being sold as upskilling. And this is what the problem is. If we don't understand AI, we don't define what AI should do, what the human should do, then we cannot upskill people. How we currently upskill is that we de-skill them. And we say that if you can ask AI a question in plain English, this is already now a skill. No, it isn't. So in schools, it's a total change. We were for so many years focusing only on content. Content is still necessary. The understanding of the content is still necessary, even more now, because now AI gives us the content and the solution to it. And I actually should understand the content very, very well to be able to challenge that even. If I don't understand the content, how can I challenge it? All I can do is I can say, yeah, sounds nice, good, here you go. And this is already, like I'm saying, then I replace myself. I don't contribute anything anymore. What kind of a job would I get later? So we have to prepare the young generation using AI in such a way, for example, with a structured prompting that we were discussing about. And I already did workshops in international schools. And one I had around 80 high school teachers. And we went through a workshop how a structured prompting would work best for their students. And they realized that they have problems themselves. And they realized how difficult it is. And they said, oh my God, if it's difficult for me, how difficult must it be for a 14-year-old, right? And this is what we have to understand. We created a tool. We created an artificial intelligence and called it tool and told everyone just use it. And that's the wrong approach.
I want to frame this as an issue of responsibility because I think that we're looking at a number of places where we've abdicated responsibility. And our responsibility in a larger sense, or our responsibility to future humans and the development and sustainability of the human race, our role with using AI, I go back to what you were talking about, anchoring. And I have thought about what if we took an AI that was trained on content only written before 1950. It is extremely unlikely that it would come up with the concept of plate tectonics, of mobile continents that didn't exist before then. That I don't know if there was enough in the literature that it might have made that jump, but let's suppose for the sake of this example that it is an unlikely thing because no one believed that. And if it's going to give the most acceptable synthesis of what everyone knew at the time, it's not going to come up with plate tectonics. And as you were saying, the fact that we are anchored to what the beginning of a conversation is means that other possibilities don't enter our minds. And so if AI starts that conversation, then the possibility of something that's outside of its imagination, like floating continents, won't come in there. That seems to me to be a very pernicious trend because I can imagine how, if unchallenged, that would lead to a stagnation in research, in development, and in education that we couldn't even recognize. Do you agree with that? I think I know your answer to that. Educational institutions in particular, those are the ones I focus on as the points of leverage in this. What can they do to push back on that as hard as possible?
Yeah, you know that I agree with what you're saying, right? In a way that would be critical. It goes back again to we first have to understand how AI actually works, how the large language models actually work. And we are still not yet there that we can see that the AI can make the jump. When we see, and we have to differentiate between those commercial large language models that are available, the ChatGPTs, the Geminis, the Claudes, and so on and so forth, and large language models that, for example, are being trained by pharmaceutical companies with their own data, and specialists in the field work with that AI. These are the smartest people in the field working with the AI that can do data analytics. That combination together, that creates new things. But the new thing, the new idea does not really come from the AI. It is rather able to analyze a huge amount of data that before the human or the technology that we had couldn't do. There's a big difference between a small language model or a large language model that's being trained on very specific data and not the general generative AI tools that are out there that are pretty much being used for everything. Like I said, it can answer whatever comes up. So there's a big difference, right? They're very specialized research AIs, very effective, together with experts in the field. But coming now, what you were saying, right? If we use those very popular generative AI chatbots that are out there, then we come to the problem that when we push for efficiency, we don't have those breaks in between anymore, and the human is not thinking and the human is not adding to the process anymore, that there is a risk of stagnation or mediocrity, like I'm saying, right? Currently, generative AI cannot really create more than, with the example, what are the advantages of democracy? You get something that is correct, but it's not really very valuable. And the same happens as well in the corporate world then. Now, what do we have to do as institutions? And we always come back to what we said before as educational institutions to avoid that, is that we have to, first of all, ourselves understand what AI is. And I see that in schools, obviously, everybody is struggling, not knowing what to do with AI. Everyone pushes from parents to the public. You should use AI. You should teach students to use AI. And then, but from where shall the knowledge come? Right? It came so fast. There is not even the experience often there with faculty, with teachers, the administration. It's just this push, go, use it, use it, use it. And that's the problem. We first have to understand how it works. And often it's interesting that a lot of people don't understand that AI by itself is not smart. Where it is really good is in analyzing large data and finding patterns. But this is as well only as good as it has been trained. For example, if I train, and this is what we call the supervised learning of an AI, when I teach an AI what a tree is, I label a photo with a tree on it and say that's a tree. And I do that with 2 million photos of different trees in whatever shape and color, and then it knows it's a tree. If I show the same 2 million photos and tell the AI that this is a car, it would believe it's a car. So we have to understand that the smartness only comes as smart as the human was in the training and what they wanted to train. Now imagine you can as well influence a whole population by training it on different political views or contents or whatever. So we have, first of all, to understand what AI is and how those tools work. I don't even want to talk again about hallucinations. I don't want to talk about the biases that are in there. But purely we should, I'm fascinated that people are not more critical, that when you ask your AI a question today, let's assume you use, I'm just saying ChatGPT 5 right now, okay? I use ChatGPT 5. We ask the same question. You ask your ChatGPT 5, I ask my ChatGPT 5, we'll get 2 different answers. And even your own ChatGPT 5 will give you a little bit of a different answer, maybe in 3 days or in 2 weeks. Or if it's being upgraded a little bit or in a different training cycle, you might get a totally different answer. Sometimes on the same day, it even contradicts itself. You ask it, you give it, it makes the analysis, tells you it is green. And then you do this a little bit later, and then it tells you, and you change the model, let's say from fast answering to long thinking, 5.5, and then it tells you, no, it's blue, right? And if we understand that AI is not like a software, it's not the next SAP, it's not the next Excel, where it doesn't matter how many numbers I put there, it will always take the right sum, and I would always get the same sum when I ask it to sum 100 numbers, right? AI works differently. So first we have to understand it in schools and universities. How does it work? And then we have to understand what impact it has on students, and impact has as well on the teachers, and the impact it has on lecturers. It's not just that, we are all smart and we are all good. Most of them don't have in-depth experience with artificial intelligence, the use of generative AI, right? They have to learn as well. We have to train our own people first. We have to understand how AI impacts the students and then train the students to use it in the right way. For example, in this structured prompting or reverse prompting that I had. And as well, we have to change the content of our lectures. We cannot continue to teach as we were teaching for the last 50 years. I don't even want to say for the last 200 years, right? We have to change. It is no longer, we are in a different time. AI is here. Information is there. Students will always take it. Luckily, there are people like friends and researchers from the Netherlands. They created EduGPT, a version of GPT that doesn't give you right away the answer, right? And if those can be used at least in the school environment, right? Obviously, students looking for convenience as soon as they get out of the classroom might use then their normal Gemini and Claudes that they have, but at least in the classroom to understand better and to teach them that technology and how to use it, how to add to it, those initiatives might help.
Your example there of the AI that's trained on images reminds me that artificial intelligence covers a whole spectrum of applications, only one of which is getting most of the attention for the topic that we're talking about, and that's generative AI, large language models. But AI that's doing, for instance, image recognition, handwriting analysis, radiographic diagnoses is a more narrow form of AI that doesn't, by and large, share the same kind of issues that we're talking about. I'm going to quote from the book where you say, the central issue is not simply whether machines know more, respond faster, or make work easier. The deeper issue is that they increasingly offer us pre-shaped interpretations of reality. They do not wait at the edge of thinking, as many earlier tools did. They meet us inside it at the moment when raw material becomes a position, end quote. And that reminded me of how so often when I'm asking a large language model for some guidance, something to help with enhancing my own thinking, it will naturally jump to giving me the answer that I didn't want. But now I have to try and ignore that because it's too early. And that's with the AIs that are trained on the way that I think. Is there something perhaps that the AI companies could do to avoid this tendency here to give us the answer easily? One can see even perhaps in a few years, maybe this gets revisited in the same way that social media is now being seen as harmful and banned for under 16s in an increasing number of countries, that this kind of encouraging cognitive offloading so readily might be seen as toxic for children, students, other populations. And so if you had the ear of every major company right now, model vendor, what would you ask them to do?
Well, let me share that nearly all of them approached me to have a conversation on the cognitive offloading and the effects and what can be done. So there's an interest because it raised public awareness and there's the discussion. But at the same time, we have to understand, and this is what I believe one of the biggest problems, that those large language models are being developed by commercial companies. They're not developed by universities, by governments. They have a commercial value. And there is, and this is what I'm always saying, who buys a product that makes your life miserable? The only, life situation that I know is going to the gym, where we pay money and actually to torture ourselves for a certain outcome. But otherwise, whatever technology had been created for the convenience of the user. So those commercial companies will not at large, because the majority of the people are looking for the convenience. And the corporations are looking for that. A lot are looking for AI agents to replace the human as well, because it might be more efficient as long as we focus on the efficiency, right? So it will be very difficult to have the big commercial giants, that they created and change it in a way that is not offering us directly the solution. There will never be a majority for it, right? The majority of people are looking for the convenience. But there are other initiatives, like I was saying, the colleagues in Netherlands that created EduGPT, right? There are more like those, and those can be tools that individuals or corporations or schools that are aware of the downside or the risks of AI or the challenges of AI, they can revert to such tools, right? So I think it's rather going in that direction. I don't believe that OpenAI or Google or Amazon or Anthropics, they will now change those models in pretty much and turn it around 180 degrees. That's not. They are all being created to serve the confirmation bias, to make you happy. That creates already problems, like you were saying, with children that rather go to their AI as a best buddy than going to their parents, because the AI always tells the child that it is right and it's so perfect and it's so good and it will be always positive. We see already negative effects there. Well, you know that as a parent, you have to be strict. And the child has to go through that, because life is not just the convenience that everyone tells you. It's also good. You're also perfect. Now, to go from here to making it actually more difficult, that we think more critical and have a more increased and more valuable output, that is unlikely, because again, you want to sell to the masses. And the AI itself, I mean, the next level is, and it started already, that you can influence consumers with AI. OpenAI is thinking as well, using it for commercial purposes, right? It is obviously, they're currently, none of them are making really money with it. At the end of the day, it's about learning about the consumer, learning about you. The AI knows everything about you and can predict very well what you would like to hear. And that's what it does. It makes you comfortable. And that we think now that those models would be changed 180 degrees is very unlikely. There might be sub-models that, like I said, like EduGPT, like others that for specific purposes are being created for a smaller group of people, for a very specific group of people, like we have in research and development, like you are saying. When you analyze today in picture analytics, AI can already identify cancer on the pixel level, where the human eye, it would take months, if not even years, to see it from the same photo, from the same picture. But these are totally different trained. Again, we shall not put all generative AI, all large language models in one pot. It's all about those commercial ones that are out there that found now their way into nearly every corporation as well. And we have to differentiate those large language models or small language models that have been trained and being used in research by specialists in specific industries, right? They do amazing work. This is a totally different approach, right? So we will probably have in some governments tendencies to, like you were saying, that children under a certain age are not allowed to use AI, and then still it's happening. I just heard today that within the EU said it was to Instagram and second one, that they are not really enforcing their restrictions for children under 13 years enough. The restriction is there, but they're not enforcing it enough, right? And so we will have those restrictions. Maybe we will see that there's going to be limitations by certain governments, but others not. Look at China. Look in other countries, right? So we only see that there is not one law. There is not one AI. There are all different countries, different regulations, and different usages and different motivations to develop AI and have it on the market. And for those commercial ones, it's probably not going to make us better thinker by making the process inconvenient. And that's what this structured prompting or reverse prompting pretty much is. It's not the convenience thing. It's not for having a fast answer. It is getting a best answer. Learn something and elevate your own critical thinking. But that's not something you can sell. That's not what the wider population wants to have, right?
Right, which argues for some form of regulation. I personally don't think it would be productive, let alone possible, to ban generative AI use under a certain age, but that there might be a need to require it to operate in different ways for those ages. It's very early days, obviously, to be able to talk about how something like that might even happen, how we might even specify it. We are at the end of our time here, and that is not limited by the number of questions that I have, but how much time we have together before we must do other things. And so I would like to thank you for what you have done here, this very important work in alerting us to something which is not, I feel, a self-correcting problem. It really can become something, as we talked about earlier, that can hack our collective brains in such a way that we don't realize what it is doing to us. And so thank you for standing up for the alternative and showing us a better way. The book, The Convenience Trap, What Happens When AI Becomes the Mind Behind Our Lives. We will have links to that in the show notes and transcript. Michael, is there anything else you'd like to tell our listeners about what they should look for, how they should follow you, or final words?
No, I mean, follow is very simple, right? You have my name, can have a look at the book. I mean, for me, it's just, I'm standing for human-centric AI. AI is here. AI won't go away. We have to use it. Let's use it in the right way. Let's be the winner when it comes to AI development together with the humans, right? Let's not be the ones that are just stepping into the convenience trap and get lost in the process, right? Let's stay on top of the wave. And that means sometimes to avoid the convenience and just to ask ourselves, right, what do we really want? And I think that would be a good start. We as educators play a very important role. And let's be honest, we have to learn as well. It's a process. And I'm very happy that I could join you today again, Peter. It's always a pleasure. You do an amazing work, and I'm very happy. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And I hope it's not the last time. Michael Gerlich, thank you for coming on AI and You.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
And that's the end of the interview. There's a link to Michael's book in the show notes and transcript. There are lots of issues with AI that I don't worry about too much, because if and when they happen, as long as they don't cause irreparable damage, we'll recognize what happened and take steps to see it doesn't happen again. Kind of self-correcting problem. But we've been talking here about ways in which AI could cause problems that we never see, or not enough of us see. And that calls for a special vigilance. In today's news, ripped in the headlines about AI, an article published in the Harvard Business Review by Jonathan Rosenthal and Neil Zuckerman argues that AI will cause businesses to abandon decision-making by consensus because of how long it takes information to pass between people and how distorted it gets in the process, compared to what it takes to execute at the speed that AI can drive a business at. As much as we might be tempted to push back on that after what we've just heard in the interview, this is a dynamic that I, sadly, predict will be widely pursued. Next week, my guest will be Tommaso Poggio, Director of the Center for Brains, Minds, and Machines at MIT. That's next week on AI and You. Until then, remember, no matter how much computers learn how to do, it's how we come together as humans that matters.
That's all for this episode of AI and You. Please leave a rating and comment and share with your friends. Get the book Artificial Intelligence and You and see more videos and articles at aiandyou.net. That's aiandyou.net, where you can also send us your questions. Thank you for listening.